guys, so my name is Sharon, and today I want to talk to you guys about polar bears. So, my presentation is on polar bears experiencing skeletal muscle atrophy in response to food deprivation and reduced activity in winter and summer. So, I chose to do polar bears because I was actually flipping through an old textbook of mine, and on a certain page there was these two little cubs playing together, and I thought it'd just be cute to do my PowerPoint on polar bears. Alright, so for the introduction, I have their scientific name, which is the Ursus marmus, and polar bears are known for their thick layer of body fat and their water repellent fur coat, and they're also known for eating mostly seals and whales because of their high body fat, and it helps them keep them nice and fat during the winter months during hibernation. So, ice caps are heavily relied on for traveling, hunting, and mating, along with their survival in general. So, and we know that these ice caps are melting. I have a picture here on the bottom right hand corner. And so we know that these ice caps are melting because of global warming. And so this obviously makes it very hard for these polar bears to do all of these essential things like traveling and hunting, and that's needed for survival. So polar bears remain inactive during hibernation, which is obviously very typical for polar bears. They experience reduced activity during the winter months, leading to muscle atrophy. So during this time when they're not very physically active, they will experience protein concentration decreasing, and their water levels will increase in their tissues. So the methods for this experiment were pretty simple actually. Scientists were studying the southern Beaufort Sea polar bears, which is found a little bit north of Alaska. And I have pictures here on the bottom left and the top right hand corner. Kind of shows you where the location was relative to the United States, relative to Alaska. So they used the biceps femoris, which is highlighted here in gray in the middle photo. This is known as the upper thigh muscle of the polar bears. And so the scientists collected blood samples to study protein analysis, to study the concentration of protein during the different months, winter and summer months. So how many bears were studied? So they had a total of 54 bears. They studied 50 female bears and 4 male polar bears. So the sampling was done between April and May. This is known as the summer months. And then again in August and October, which were known as the winter months. So the independent, dependent, and constant variables. So first off, the independent variables were the levels of physical activity present during the summer and winter months, along with the food deprivation and fasting during the summer and winter months. So food deprivation was mostly found during the winter months, and the fasting was found to be more prevalent during the summer months when obviously the ice caps were melting and the polar bears weren't able to have access to that much food because of the melting ice caps. And the dependent variable was the level of muscle atrophy present during the winter and summer months. And then the constant variables were the bicep femoris samples that were used for all 54 polar bears. The scientists studied 500 milligrams for each polar bear. And then finally, the last constant variable was the location where the scientists found all of these polar bears, which was the southern Beaufort Sea region that I highlighted in the previous couple slides. So the results. So it was very apparent that the results were going to prove our hypothesis correct. We found that the greatest signs of muscle atrophy were present during the winter months, and that there was a decrease in the protein concentration while they were doing the protein analysis. And scientists were also able to find that there was an increase of water in their tissues during these months as well. And so here on the bottom, I have a picture of a muscle fiber, which basically highlights the different fibers, the myosin, the actin, all of these things that we learned previously previously in anatomy or biology. And I just happen to have it here kind of just to show you the breakdown of a typical muscle tissue. And then here on the right hand side, I have the October polar bears, their protein is right here on the left, and then the August or the summer bears were found here on the right. And obviously, the two lines are very much different in their thickness. So the thicker lines show a thicker concentration of protein, and the thinner lines will obviously be a much lesser concentration of protein. So some more results. The bears that fasted throughout the summer also experienced muscle atrophy. Obviously, they weren't eating what they're normally used to eating, and they aren't getting that much protein. So think about, if you don't eat that much protein, you're obviously not going to be bulking up the same way you would be if you're eating a relatively high protein dense diet. And so the melting ice caps also had a huge factor in this, because since polar bears are not able to hunt as well as they would be when the ice caps are nice and thick, they're not cracking, they're not breaking. So that definitely led to an increased level of muscle atrophy. So summer fasting also equals muscle atrophy. Hibernation also equals muscle atrophy. So those two factors definitely played a huge role when studying the levels of muscle atrophy in polar bears. So for our conclusion, the protein conservation analysis was very key in determining how much atrophy was present and how polar bears were surviving throughout the winter and summer months. And so the physical levels of inactivity were also very key in having a decreased amount of atrophy, having a decreased amount of activity, and leading to increased levels of atrophy. So these two go hand in hand. Physical inactivity leads to higher levels of muscle atrophy. And then finally, for our last set of conclusion points, I have that the food deprivation and hibernation both cause fluctuations in protein levels, and which occurred during summer and winter months. But the greatest fluctuations were occurring during the winter time, when the polar bears were the least active. But luckily for the polar bears, their protein levels will usually go back to normal once they resume hunting. Once they resume their normal physical activity levels, everything will go right back to normal. Similar to us humans, if we stop working out, we stop going to the gym, or whatever the case is, then obviously our protein levels and our muscle appearance will go right back to normal once we start hitting the gym again, and we start eating right again. Similar to us humans, polar bears experience the same thing. And so, yeah, this is a citation page. Thank you so much for listening.